Hello, hello, hello. Good evening and welcome to Fettling Flames. If you can see and hear me, could you please let me know in the comment section? You're welcome if you're just joining us. You're welcome, glad to have you. I just want to be sure that I am seen and heard. So this is Fettling Flames is a conversation we have here on the Royal Okuman channel every Friday at 6 p.m. Fettling Flames is where we kindle the subtle fires that mend you into wholeness. And today we will be talking about passing batons over battles. I just want to be sure that I can see. Oh, thank you. So I can be seen and I can be heard. Thank you so much. You're very welcome. So today we are talking about passing batons over battles. So what is a baton? A baton is a sort of a right of authority, a staff. It's a form of a staff, a symbol of authority or a symbol of continuity. So if you've ever seen where a relay race is taking place, you would notice that there is a baton that is usually handed over to the first person who takes off the race. And then as they run, they give the baton to the next person at a certain point, and that person starts, continues the race from where they have stopped. So when we talk about batons, we are talking about passing on authority, passing on influence, passing on right judgment, passing on right decisions. And of course, we all know what battles are. So battles are things that keep us constantly in a place of struggle, in a place of conflict, in a place of obstruction. We are continually at loggerheads. We are continually in friction mode with a particular circumstance or with a particular force. So the life that we live is like a sentence. Usually, when you write one sentence and you put a full stop, you start another. So where one sentence stops, a new one begins. The same way, where one person's life stops is just where another person's life begins. And that is the circle of life. The circle of life means that while people are being born, others are dying. And while others are dying, more are being born. So there is that replacement system in the design of life. What that means is that we live in continuity of where other people have left off. We do not exist independently. Like the saying goes, no man is an island. You did not start living on your own and you would not end by yourself. The life that you are living now is a continuation of what another person started. Over the years, over the decade, mankind has existed, but it started from somewhere. It started with Adam and Eve. It started with the life that they lived. It started with the things that they did. And whatsoever be the repercussions that we bear as humanity are the result of the choices, the result of the decisions that the people who came before us made. The choices that we make today become the realities of our children tomorrow. The choices that we as humans as life had in life have had to face were the choices that were established by the actions of our forefathers. What Abraham did, when you backdate it to the origin, to the beginning, then you see what Adam did and what Eve did. Whatever was the result of their choices are become the realities of our lifestyle. So the reason we are talking about passing batons over battles is that we must begin to think as our lives as a system of progression, that after we have lived and gone, there are yet more people who will come after us. And when they come, when it gets to their turn, what becomes of them? What becomes of their life? What choices would they find that has already been made? What foundations would they discover that we have already made? We must begin to think about life with intentionality. We must begin to think posterity as opposed to immediate. We must begin to think about tomorrow, years down the line, as opposed to what is happening in the now. Because what we permit today becomes what the next generation will promote. What we permit today becomes what the next generation will promote. What we consider a duty today will become a devotion for the next generation. For every generation that comes up, whatever was in existence becomes amplified. And it's a basic reality. Whatever we are seeing today on the earth are not new. None of them are new. They are only amplified versions of things that have been. So our lifestyle are the products of legacies, are the products of choices. They become the blueprint for the next generation. Our lifestyle becomes the manuscript that they need for how they should live, for what they should believe in, for what they should choose, for the decisions they should make, for the opportunities they should grab. This is why it is important that we must begin to think in the direction of what am I leaving behind? What am I passing on? Am I going to leave batons or am I going to leave battles? Now, let's talk about the things that inform battles. What are the things that constitute the battles that we face today? The first one would be our choices. The things you choose today, the decisions you make today will become the bedrock of the life that your children will face tomorrow. And so, if there is a battle presently that you are dealing with, it is probably the result of a choice that those who came before you made. And when we speak about this kind of battle, we speak in the light of things that were inherited. The reason why many times we are encouraged not to, engage in certain negative attitudes, in certain questionable character, it's not because it just doesn't benefit you, but it just doesn't benefit the next generation. The reason you are being encouraged to break a negative habit is because the habits that you fail to deal with today will become an addiction for the next generation. The things that we consider as generational causes, we are things that once started as consistent habits that could not be broken. They started as lifestyles. In a family, somebody became a drunk, started to drink. It was a choice in the first place. And all over time, it became a pattern. Before you knew it, it became an addiction. Before you knew it, it became a sort of a way of life, a habit, a character trait. It went beyond just being an attitude to becoming something that has entered into the bloodstream, something that has entered into the DNA of that person. And whatever you do, your body internalizes. When it internalizes it, it enters into your memory, it enters into your brain, it enters into your system, and it begins to accumulate as part of who you become. Over time, those accumulated things form your genetics. And what that means is that by the time you are having another offspring, by the time you are reproducing another human being, there is a tendency to transfer those things that you have accumulated as character, as attitude, as habit, as lifestyle to the next person. So today we talk about generational causes. We talk about patterns in the family. We talk about things that are prevalent in certain homes, in certain climes, with certain people. But they were first engineered by people's behavior, by people's character that they fail to deal with. You look at a family and you say, in this family, they are very promiscuous, and it is like a way of life for them. But when you begin to trace it back, you can actually trace back that lifestyle to the forefathers, to somebody in the lineage who made a choice, who could not build self-control, who could not imbibe the principles of discipline, who could not manage how they behaved, how they carried themselves, who was very, here and there about their attitude. Over time, that lifestyle became internalized. And when they had the next child, the next offspring was born into such a negative attitude. It became part of their genetics. It became part of their DNA. That child grew up with it, coupled with the fact that the person who reproduced them did not have the ability to help them overcome it. Now, as they grew up into it, it continued, it magnified, and then it became worse than when they were actually, from the person who it actually came from. So the reality is this, that the things you do not manage today, the things you do not deal with today, become the standard for your children, become the lifestyle for the next generation. The quarrels you fail to settle today becomes the full-blown fights that your children will have to fight tomorrow. So choices influence our battles. Habits influence our battles. Environment influences our battles. Where you choose to stay, where the place that shapes your attitude, your character, your mindset, your psychology, they become battles. In the scripture, Abraham had a battle. He had an attitude that he could not deal with. He he had this mannerism, this thing about telling a lie when he is under pressure. And at a certain point in his life, he went down to Egypt, and then he connived with his wife to say that his wife was his sister, or because he was afraid of losing her. Good and fine. God fought that battle for him. God rescued his wife. But that character was not dealt with. And what happened? Years down the line, when he had Isaac, history repeated itself. That same thing that happened between him and his wife happened between Isaac and his own wife. A time came to in Isaac's life when he had to go back to Egypt in that same environment, and he had to lie again that his wife was his sister. By the time Isaac and Rebekah had Esau and Jacob, that attitude had become an ingrained genetical, mm, you know, misbehavior in the life of Jacob. By the time he got to Jacob, it was it was a mixture of lies, craftiness, deceit, and all whatnot. So for every generation, negative attitudes amplify. And over time, we start to see what you call generational curses. Now, Jacob had to fight, had to struggle, it took him years to try to come out of that habit of deception, of craftiness. But then, by this time, Jacob had already had his children. By the time Jacob was trying to undo his wrongs, was trying to deal with his negative habits, he already had his children. Most of his children had been born. And so that attitude, that character trait, were all passed down to them. What happened when he got to the point of his children? It became more amplified. It was worse than it was with him, because by this time his children were now talking about killing their brother. And over and over again, the cycle continued until it became a pattern. If you read down throughout the scripture, you will see instances of where things that started as very little things, mistakes, errors, became full-blown generational curses. So the idea today is that we must start to think about dealing with our battles. Anything that is a struggle for you as a person must have to be dealt with. You must start to be deliberate about your choices, because it's not just about you. It's about the next generation. It's about the people coming behind. You must start to think on the part of positive influence. You must start to take responsibility for who you are and for what you become. Many times we have a lot of people, especially young people, who are very quick to give excuses for their wrong behavior. You have a negative lifestyle, you have an attitude that is very unwelcoming. And instead of dealing with it, you categorize it as, this is how I am. That might have been how a person was born, but that shouldn't be how you should remain. As you mature, as you grow, and you find out that these are struggles, these are real life challenges that you're having to deal with, you must seek the path to come out of those things, to break away from those things. Otherwise, they become strongholds, they become set in stone in your life. And when that foundation has been laid, every person that comes after you will fall into the mold. It becomes a mold for your children, for your descendants, for your successors, those that are coming after you. But how about we begin to think about passing on batons? How about we begin to think about passing on the symbol of influence, passing on the symbol of authority, passing on the symbol of righteousness? How about we begin to think about creating opportunities, creating a wholesome future, creating a lifestyle that makes things easier than what it looks like? How about we start to create a sustainable future rather than a destructive one? Because when you pass on batons, you create opportunities for a sustainable future. You give a chance for the future to have a beautiful expectation to be looked up to. However, when you pass on battles, you create room for a destructive future. When you pass on batons, you create opportunities for a sustainable future. But when you pass on battles, you create room for a destructive future. Batons create opportunities. Battles create obstacles. Batons create posterity. Battles create destruction, extinction. If you fail to fight a battle today, you leave it for the next generation. Where you stop is where the next generation begins. Where you stop fighting is where the next generation begins. The battles you refuse to fight today, the wrong habits you refuse to break away from today, becomes the standard for the next generation. And the reason why we're having a lot of challenges with the younger generation is because there is so much that the older generation could not finish. When the children of Israel were passing from Egypt to the promised land on their way, there were certain battles that they needed to fight. And the instruction that God gave them was to go into the land, destroy the nations that were there because their time was up, and then take over the land. If you read in certain places, you will find out that there were some enemies that the Israelites could not evacuate. They couldn't finish those battles. And those people they couldn't defeat, the only thing they did was to turn them into slaves and begin to use them. Well, at the time, it was convenient. It worked for them. It helped them with their menial jobs, with their manual work and all of that. But what happened over time, as generations began to come, those persons, those people that they could not eliminate, became hindrances, became obstacles for their children. We talk about the Amalekites, the people that could not be finished at a certain point in the battle. Much later, they became a threat to Israel. And that was why God was angry with Saul, because God gave Saul an instruction and said, go and eliminate the Amalekites because of what they did to the children of Israel when they were transitioning to the promised land. Saul went there and did his pleasure. He went there, killed those that he wanted to kill, and brought back the king and brought back certain things. And that was why God had to send Samuel to confront him, to say, you have disobeyed me. Saul was being defensive. He was trying to say, oh, I did the right thing. I just saved a little for the people. He was finding excuses. What Saul didn't know was that long after he had died and left, the people that he spared, the Amalekite king that he spared, his son, much later, years down the line, grew up and became a threat to Israel. He became the weapon fashioned against Israel because somebody disobeyed. So it's very easy to stay in a place of convenience and give excuses why you should not do the right thing. You give excuses why you should not develop good habits, why you should not invest in yourself, why you should not correct your mistakes, why you should not take corrections and make up for your errors. But what you don't know is that over time you start to lay the foundation, a wrong precedent for the coming generation. Batons help us to create legacies. Everyone you know today that has done something great, that has influenced the world in one way or the other, has created a legacy for you. They left something behind that you are enjoying today. We are enjoying light because somebody left a legacy. It was a choice. Nobody insisted, nobody influenced him to create the light bulb. It was a choice that he made, but he has left a legacy for the world. The internet that we are enjoying today was because someone left a legacy. Someone chose to finish the battle of having to struggle to communicate with people so that you don't have to fight that battle again. Someone chose the battle of demystifying communication by developing the telephone, by developing the mobile phone, because, they saw the future. And today, going to write letters and post is no longer a thing. It's no longer fashion. So Batons not just create legacies, they give room for innovations. If you do something and you leave it as a trail, it becomes a symbol to another person that something is possible. So every little influence matters. And you don't have to be special to be influential. You don't have to be popular. You don't have to be a celebrity. You can make little steady changes in the environment where you are. You can create very subtle changes where you are. The little changes you make, the little decisions you take, the little attitudes that you improve on, the little characters that you work on, the little investments that you make on yourself becomes a legacy for the next generation. When we talk about legacy, many times people think it's about money. No, money fades away, money would finish. But there is something about keeping a blueprint, keeping a manuscript, keeping a system, a way of life that allows for the people coming after you to see what can be done. And one of the stories that thrilled me about legacies was what David did for his son Solomon. David actually wanted to build a house for God, but then he didn't have that permission from God. It would have been easier for him to relax and say, anyway, God didn't choose me to do it. I mean, someone else can as well do it. Let's let it go. But he didn't do that. What did he do? He went ahead and he made provision. David aligned himself with nations, with kings, and they gifted him. They gave him all the resources that he needed. He had surplus gold, silver, everything that was needed. He made contracts with the architects, with the people who were very good at designs and architecture and all of that, and craftsmanship. He set those things in place. And when Solomon came, the work became very much easier. Solomon didn't have to struggle. So imagine that it took Solomon 7 years to build the temple of God. If David had not even made any preparation. That means it might have taken him double or triple the time. But with all the preparation that was made, it still took Solomon 7 years to complete the house of God. It made Solomon's reign very easy. David finished all the battles that were outstanding so that his son didn't have to inherit a new battle. Whatever new battle that Solomon had to fight was the one that he orchestrated himself. And when Solomon came on board, he saw a blueprint that it is possible to be a king and not have to fight a battle. So what Solomon did was to fix himself into the design, into the blueprint, into the mold that was already created. And so he had a peaceful reign. David established a kingdom that proved to Solomon that it is possible to be a king without wars. And instead of investing time in, fighting enemies and killing people and accumulating bloodshed, Solomon invested his time in building the house of God. There is something about creating opportunities through the decisions that you take today that gives your generation the opportunity to have a deeper relationship with God because you've laid the foundation. There are men of God today who started their journey with God, and what they did was that by reason of their relationship with God, they opened portals in the spirit for their children. They opened portals, they opened doors of access in certain realms for their children, so that the struggles that they had to go through, their children didn't have to go through it. So if you have something that you're struggling with, it could be that God has put you in that position so that you could save the next generation. Do not excuse yourself out of an opportunity to create generational wealth, generational impact, generational influence, just because you want to be in a place of comfort. How about you make the sacrifices today so that the world can be better tomorrow, so that a people can be better tomorrow? The people who handed us the gospel, the people who handed us Christianity, did that on the altar of their lives. Many of them had to be martyred. Many of them had to die so that the gospel can get to us, so that we can understand the language of liberation. But even them had to do that because they saw a blueprint. People like Stephen had to die so that the gospel will spread. Because Stephen's death became a source of evangelism. But that was a price he had to pay. The early church in scripture had to be scattered. They had to lose that comfort. They had to lose their peace so that the gospel can spread. It was a sacrifice they had to make. And they did. And over again, the baton of the gospel kept passing on to different people until finally it came to you. And when it comes to you, you decide to relax. You decide to say, it's not my business. I just want to live my life. I just want to do my thing. I don't want to disturb anybody. Why? If you keep silent, if you say nothing, if you do nothing, the next generation is at the risk of the enemy. So we must begin to think in the direction of change. We must begin to think in the direction of passing on authority. We must refuse to be silent over the things that we should be speaking about. We must refuse to be in a place of complacency when we can actually push for change, push for impact. If there are things that you know are a struggle in your family, with your parents, with your grandparents, with your siblings, with yourself, and you find yourself struggling with it, you must make a conscious decision that this battle ends with me so that my children don't have to fight it. Because the battles you don't fight today becomes the wars your children will face tomorrow. The reason you are where you are today was because someone made a choice. If your mother didn't make the choice to marry your father, maybe you wouldn't be here. Even if a person was born by mistake, even if it wasn't planned for, it was still a choice. Because whoever gave birth to you might have chosen to abort you. And aborting you means that you wouldn't have existed. But the fact that they chose to keep you means that you had a chance at life. What choices are you making? What choices are you making? What decisions are you taking at life? You must begin to live calculatively, deliberately. You don't just jump into decisions because it favors you in the now. You see a lot of young people, for them, fun is a thing. They just want to catch cruise. They love the vibes. But life is not all about vibes. What about the impact on who you are becoming? What about the things that you do today that tomorrow you begin to see them as automatic, automatics in the life of your children? For you, it was a practice. For your children, it was a follow come. They were born with it. Because when you did those things, your body internalized them. Your bloodstreams, your DNA, your genetics absorbed it, that this is part of who you are. And what that meant was that every other person who was going to come through you would carry that same thread. So today, let's choose to pass on batons. Let's choose to pass on positive lifestyle, positive influence, impact. Let's choose to pass on authority. Let's choose to pass on wealth of knowledge, wealth of righteousness, wealth of good behavior, so that the next generation would believe that those things are possible. Thank you for staying with me. This is where we come to the end of Fettling Flames for today. I hope that you have learned something. Share with us in the comment section what you have learned and how this has blessed you. Until we come your way again next time, next week, same place. Good evening and have a lovely day. Bye.